Bucharest, December 21st, 1989. Everything was under control. At least, that's what he believed. The square was full, not with supporters, but with people who had been ordered to be there. Nicolae Ceausescu steps out onto the balcony. He's done this hundreds of times. He knows exactly what's going to happen. He begins to speak, and then a sound appears, a sound that should not have existed in that place. Ceausescu stops. For the first time in 24 years, he doesn't understand what's happening. And in that second, the regime was already over. And the most dangerous part was that he had no idea. In 1989, the world around Ceausescu was crumbling, and every country that fell was a warning that he ignored. Poland, Hungary, East Germany, Czechoslovakia. One by one, communist regimes were swept away, some within weeks, some within days. Ceausescu watched it all and called it treason. In his view, the other leaders had grown weak. They had yielded to Western pressure. They had abandoned their principles. He would not yield. In December, the signs came closer. Timișoara, Romania's second-largest city, erupted in protests. The Securitate responded with violence. Demonstrators were killed. The world was watching. Ceausescu's response? He boarded a plane for a state visit to Iran. While his own city bled, he was in Tehran discussing bilateral relations. When he returned 3 days later, the situation had spread. Other cities, more protests. The regime was beginning to crack from within. Soldiers refusing orders, officials disappearing. His advisors tried to warn him. He did the opposite. He did what had always worked, and decided to test reality itself. He called a rally. But to understand why that decision was impossible for him, you need to understand what he had built. Ceausescu took power in Romania in 1965, and for a few years, he seemed different from other Soviet bloc leaders. He publicly criticized the invasion of Czechoslovakia, welcomed Nixon to Bucharest. The world called him a communist dissident. It was an illusion. In 1971, on a visit to North Korea, he saw Kim Il-sung. He saw the cult. He saw an entire country bent in reverence before a single man. And he returned to Romania with an idea. The Securitate expanded until it became one of the most feared secret police forces in Eastern Europe. 1 in 4 Romanians was an informant. People turned up the radio to full volume before saying anything in the kitchen. The fear wasn't the army in the streets, it was the microphone hidden behind the wallpaper. Elena Ceausescu was elevated to co-ruler. She didn't know the chemical formula for water, but she demanded to be called Doctor Honoris Causa in chemistry by universities around the world. If a Romanian scientist published something brilliant, her name had to come first. In the center of Bucharest, the Palace of the People rose brick by brick, the second largest building in the world behind only the Pentagon. Built with forced labor after demolishing an entire historic neighborhood to make room. While the palace's crystal chandeliers blazed, Romanian families had dinner in the dark. The government had banned light bulbs above 40 watts. Electricity was rationed, heating cut off in winter. Ceausescu didn't see that darkness. He was exporting nearly all of Romania's agricultural production to pay off the country's foreign debt, while sending pamphlets to the people teaching them to eat rationally. He signed decrees establishing exactly how many calories each person was allowed to consume per day. Meat disappeared. Milk became a luxury. Meanwhile, his dog, a Labrador named Corbu, who who held the rank of colonel in the Romanian army, received imported food from Great Britain. He wanted to be the only dictator in history who owed nothing to anyone, even if the price was the stunted growth of an entire generation. And here is the detail that changes everything. He wasn't an imposter pretending to believe. He believed. Decades of constant flattery, advisors who never contradicted him, reports edited before they reached his desk. All of this doesn't only deceive the people, it deceives the leader himself. Ceausescu had become the most faithful product of his own propaganda. And that is exactly where the problem began. December 21st, 1989, Bucharest. Republic Square was full. Factories and schools had been emptied to guarantee the numbers. Red banners, loudspeakers, everything in its place. Ceausescu appeared on the balcony at 12:30 p.m. He began speaking about the achievements of socialism, about foreign enemies, about the unbreakable strength of the Romanian people. The crowd applauded at the right moments. And then, someone shouted. A single shout, lost somewhere in the crowd. For a second, it seems like a mistake. And then another comes, and another. No one knows who was first. No one ever found out. But one shout found another shout, and another. And within seconds, a sound that had never existed in that square began to grow, rising from below, from within the mandatory crowd, from the people who had been sent there to applaud. Booing. At first, barely noticeable, but then impossible to ignore. Ceausescu looks out at the crowd, like someone trying to recognize a familiar face and finding nothing. Then he stops in the middle of a sentence. He raises his hand, the same gesture as always, the gesture that asked for silence and received silence. This time, it didn't work. The sound grew, and he mumbled into the open microphone. "Hello? Hello?" As if the problem was the sound, as if this were some kind of technical glitch. Then he offered a minimum wage increase, right there on the spot, in front of a crowd that was no longer listening. In the broadcast booth of the state television station, the technicians panicked. The live feed was cut abruptly. Instead of Ceausescu, Romanians saw a blue screen. But it was too late. In neighboring countries, where the signal had been picked up before the cut, the world had seen. It had seen Ceausescu's face in that moment. It had seen a man who didn't understand what was happening. Not anger, not fear, confusion. The expression of someone for whom this was impossible. And it was in that cut, in that desperate last attempt to control the narrative, that the regime truly ceased to exist. Not when soldiers switched sides, not when the helicopter took off. There, in that second. After that, nothing could be controlled anymore. Within 24 hours, the most powerful man in Romania would be hitchhiking on a dirt road. And the helicopter that was supposed to save him was flying in circles on purpose. Before we continue, do you think he knew at any point that he was losing control? Let us know in the comments. On the morning of December 22nd, Bucharest was on fire. Literally. Protesters had taken the streets. Government buildings were burning. The Securitate was firing into the crowd, but the regular military, one by one, had begun refusing orders. Ceausescu tried one last time. He returned to the balcony of the Central Committee to give a speech. He was met with more booing. This time, he didn't wait for a silence that would never come. He went inside and never came back out. For hours, the building was surrounded by the crowd. At 12:08 p.m., a helicopter lifted off from the roof of the Central Committee. Inside, Nicolae Ceausescu, Elena, and 2 aides. The helicopter was overloaded. For a few seconds, it barely managed to climb. Protesters were already in the corridor leading to the roof. From above, he saw Bucharest small, and for the first time, hostile. No destination. The pilot flew in zigzags, claiming radio problems. In truth, he was stalling, waiting for an order that never came from the new power still forming below. Ceausescu tried to reach military units along the way. Hours earlier, he had been the most powerful man in the country. Now, no one was answering his calls. They landed on a road and tried to flag down cars. A driver stopped, said he could help. He lied. He drove slowly, invented mechanical problems, bought time, and dropped them near a checkpoint. The most feared man in Romania had been deceived by an ordinary citizen with an old car. They were detained by local police officers who, at that moment, had no idea what to do with them. The man who had built the Palace of the People was put in a patrol car and taken to a military barracks. No palace, no securitate, no cameras. Just two old people in a room, waiting. But the story wasn't over yet. There was one final act, and it would be fast, much faster than anyone expected, and it would happen just a few days later. December 25th, 1989. The decision had been made, immediate trial. There was no time for a formal court. The new government knew that every hour Ceausescu remained alive was an hour the Securitate might try to rescue him. An improvised room in the Târgoviște barracks, 3 military judges, a prosecutor, a video camera. Nicolae and Elena Ceausescu seated on plastic chairs in their winter coats, like 2 retirees in a waiting room. Elena, who had presented herself to the world as a scientist and a symbol of elegance, had disheveled hair and dirty stockings. The woman who had demanded honoris causa from universities around the world arrived at her trial the way anyone would after a night on the run. The trial lasted less than 2 hours. The charges: genocide, destruction of the national economy, crimes against the state. Elena interrupted, argued, refused to answer. Ceausescu repeatedly declared that he did not recognize the tribunal. It was the last form of control he had left. Refusing the legitimacy of what was happening, if he didn't acknowledge it, maybe it wasn't real. The sentence was death, immediate. They were both led to an inner courtyard. A firing squad was waiting. Elena asked whether they would be tied up. A soldier said it wasn't necessary. Then she looked at the soldiers around her and said she had been like a mother to them. One of them answered, "What kind of mother kills her children?" Ceausescu asked to sing the Internationale, the communist anthem. No one allowed it. The soldiers fired before the agreed signal. They didn't wait for the formal order. They fired far more than necessary. The bodies fell against the courtyard wall. It was Christmas. The execution was filmed, and on the night of December 25th, 1989, Romanian television, the same broadcaster that for decades had transmitted the cult of the genius of the Carpathians, broadcast the images of Nicolae and Elena Ceausescu's bodies on the floor of a military barracks courtyard. Romanians watched in silence. Then they went into the streets to celebrate. Nicolae Ceausescu ruled Romania for 24 years. He built a reality machine so efficient that he ended up trapped inside it. He didn't fall because his enemies were stronger. He fell because, on that balcony on December 21st, he encountered something his machine had never been built to handle: reality. And he simply didn't know what to do with it. The Palace of the People still stands in Bucharest. It is the largest building in the European Union. Romanians still call it, to this day, the People's House. It is still waiting. If this story made you think about men who build empires of conviction, you need to know another one. He was also deposed. He also lost everything. But unlike Ceausescu, he didn't build a lie. He believed in something real. And that is exactly why they destroyed him. Mohammad Mossadegh was Iran's democratically elected prime minister. He wanted nothing more than for his country's oil to belong to his people. In 1953, in the early hours of an August morning, the CIA and the British decided that could not happen. He was found in his pajamas. He refused to flee, and he spent the rest of his life under house arrest, while the world that had betrayed him moved on as if nothing had happened. You'll find the link on screen now and in the first pinned comment. Thank you for staying until the end. If these stories resonate with you, share this with someone who'll appreciate it. Subscribe to the channel and leave your comment below. See you in the next one.